So Russia's back to threatening World War III, which unfortunately is just kind of what they do when things aren't going the way they'd like. This one is courtesy of former Russian Prime Minister and President Dimitry Medvedev, who a few hours ago said, quote, "Regarding Trump's words about Putin playing with fire and really bad things happening to Russia, I only know of one really bad thing, World War III, and I hope Trump understands this." What's frustrating here, and we'll get into the whole backstory, Trump statements, the reactions from Russian media, they're actually kind of funny and trolling a little bit. What's frustrating here is that Russia goes this route so frequently. Anybody who's been following this war or Russia for a period of time knows that it is pretty common that senior government officials, I'm not talking about like fringe media personalities trying to drive clicks, senior government officials or senior government advisors start threatening World War III or nuclear attacks against the United States or other NATO countries. That's a problem because those are very serious subjects. And when Russia throws those threats around as often as they do, you can't take them as seriously as we should. So I hate that Russia continues to escalate the rhetoric as quickly as they do. Nonetheless, this Medvedev quote came in response to a Trump statement earlier today where the president said, quote, "What Vladimir Putin doesn't realize is that if it weren't for me, lots of really bad things would have already happened to Russia. And I mean really bad. He's playing with fire." Now, this has been interpreted a couple different ways. I'll get into my personal assessment later in today's video. But for a little added context, it's worth mentioning that this isn't the first time. It's, I think, the second time that Trump has come out pretty aggressively against Putin. That is, if we're not counting the time like a month ago where he said, "Vladimir, stop," because that didn't sound all that threatening. But a couple days ago, Trump was asked about these ongoing missile and drone strikes that Russia was launching into Ukraine, and Trump responded essentially sounding frustrated. Like, hey, things are not going the way that I had hoped they would. I don't know what the hell is going on with Putin. As a little background and for some context, let's give that a listen. Again, a clip from 2 days ago.
I don't know what the hell happened to Putin. I've known him a long time, always gotten along with him, but he's sending rockets into cities and killing people, and I don't like it at all, okay? We're in the middle of talking, and he's shooting rockets into Kiev and other cities. I don't like it at all.
Mr. President, what do you want to do about that?
I'm surprised. I'm very surprised. We'll see what we're going to do. What am I going to tell you? You're the fake news, aren't you? You're totally fake. All right, any other questions? I don't like what Putin is doing, not even a little bit. He's killing people. And something happened to this guy, and I don't like it.
So to have that followed with this, really bad, Putin is playing with fire, there's a little bit of a theme there. And I don't know, maybe we're starting to head in that direction. Now, I should mention that barely an hour after Trump issued this new threat towards Putin, Russia launched their newest wave of missiles and drones into Ukraine. So I don't know if Putin's not listening or if he does listen and he doesn't care, which is kind of where I'm falling these days. I just don't think Putin takes any of this stuff seriously. But we do have some people in the United States trying to remind Putin, hey, this is different. We're actually going to stick to those red lines. We'll see. Now, turning over to some Russian media responses, a few of these are kind of funny. Starting with Russia Today, they said Trump's message leaves little room for misinterpretation until he posts the opposite tomorrow morning. Like comedy routines, in a sense. Two Majors is a Russian mill blogger, so private organizations, individuals, and groups that are opining on the war and generally provide pretty reliable information, I'll say. Two Majors said, quote, "The random phrase generator," talking about President Trump, "has issued another threat, either crushing sanctions or permission to strike deep into Russia with American weapons. So let's put our hope in the Army and Navy comrades and not in Trump, the peacemaker." Couple notes there. Yesterday, we got word that the United States, Germany, France, and the UK have authorized Ukraine to strike anywhere in Russian territory within the range of Western-provided munitions. There's been a little debate as to how long that's actually been in effect, but nonetheless, it was made public yesterday. So a lot of what we're seeing in today's comments is the Trump statement layered on top of that news that came out yesterday. Also, this mention about Trump the peacemaker, we saw a lot of that in Russian channels leading up to and shortly after the election. The idea that kind of the average Russian was thinking that Trump would come in and find an end to the war on Russian terms. And a lot of these mill bloggers were trying to tamp expectations and say, there's no indication that's actually the route it's going to go. And they were pointing at kind of the first Trump presidency, saying he wasn't necessarily like easygoing on Putin. He did provide a lot of weapon systems to Ukraine. So that's where the Trump the peacemaker phrase is coming in there. Military informant is a good one. Says Trump once skimmed through analyst reports about the losses and prolonged stalemate at the front and decided that Russia and Ukraine really wanted to end this conflict, which was unpromising from the viewpoint because of business. This is kind of something that I've said before, where I generally view that Trump thought that this was going to be a lot easier to resolve than it actually was, and now he's getting fired up and he's ready to walk away. They say Trump most likely believed that Kyiv and Moscow simply lacked someone who would unite them in this peaceful desire, acting as a trustworthy mediator. You just need to rush in with both feet and extend a helping hand, and then both will grab hold and sign everything at once. But the reality turned out to be a completely different and not subject to the laws of business with economic benefit. Both sides have completely opposite views on ending the war and are not going to make peace simply because the new American administration wanted it that way. Yes, I feel like we've been hammering that point for a while. There's enough complexities here. There's not a lot of middle ground that simply coming in and saying enough's enough, it's time for peace, was never going to do the trick. Now, did Trump actually believe that? Did he trust people that he should not have trusted that maybe weren't following this conflict? I don't know, but that does appear to be the viewpoint from the administration at this point. Military informant continues by saying, now the American grandfather simply doesn't know how to sort this all out. That's why he either talks about leaving the negotiations or throws himself into Vladimir Putin's arms, or on the contrary, gets offended and scolds him on the internet. Look, there's a real chance that Trump sees some of this commentary they're mocking him, right? Saying, yeah, Trump made up his mind. He's scolding Putin right now. He's going to change his mind tomorrow. He doesn't actually know what he's doing. Russian media, the unofficial media here through the mill bloggers, is mocking Trump. There's a significant chance some of these make it through to at least Trump's advisors, and they let him know how this stuff is being received. And we might actually see a follow through in terms of some of these actions to, further sanction Russia, shut off some of their oil exports, or maybe provide additional weaponry to Ukraine, or at the very least make more weapons available for sale to our European allies who can give them to Ukraine. There's a lot of options there. Then another interesting one here, our favorite doom poster over in Russia, Igor Girkin, former Russian commander, very pro-Russian, very nationalistic, wants Russia to win the war, has been imprisoned, kind of on house arrest, if you will, and he's communicating through his attorney for not being supportive enough of the Putin government and the military. He essentially from day one has said, we are not doing this right. We need to be more aggressive. We need to be killing more Ukrainians. He's doing whatever he can to get Russia to win this war. He said, quote, unfortunately, all of the demands of our foreign ministry, all of the statements of our leadership are now perceived as empty words, because such a number of red lines that the West calmly crossed without encountering any resistance or adequate response. Unfortunately, no one is afraid of us. No one trusts us in terms of our ability to carry out our threats. They see that we have not been able to defeat Ukraine for a long time. And again, this is coming, you have to consider the context here. These are new threats coming from President Trump, layered on top of that announcement yesterday that Ukraine is now authorized to fire Western munitions into Russian territory. That's the general context of Girkin's statement here. So when we're hearing threats from Russian leaders, you have others inside of Russia saying they don't believe us anymore because we've threatened this so many times. It's the boy who cried wolf, World War III edition. It's all they do. Threatening nuclear attacks whenever things don't go exactly how they had planned. And it's not just people in the West seeing that, but some Russians as well. All right, so the Russian reaction is always kind of entertaining, but let's take a look at how this is being received in the United States, starting with U.S. Senator Lindsey Graham, who posted today a couple times in support of these statements by President Trump. Graham said, quote, I appreciate all that President Trump has done to try and end this terrible war, but to end any war, you must have willing partners. As of yet, Putin is not willing. Agree. I think there's zero indications right now that Putin is actually interested in any sort of peaceful settlement to bring this war to a close. And we're starting to see more and more officials here in the United States go, it didn't just require like a handshake and some nice words and the promise of maybe we'll ease up some economic sanctions in the future. This is an existential war for Putin. He views this as integral to the survival of his reign on power in Russia. As of now, he is not willing to negotiate an inch. Graham says, as to Putin, we must remember that this is the man who facilitated the Assad regime in dropping barrel bombs from helicopters on innocent civilians and intentionally targeted hospitals in Syria. Yeah, he's not a good dude. The same barbaric behavior is playing out in Ukraine. To the Russian people, Putin is leading you into the abyss. Tens of thousands of Russian soldiers killed and wounded, an economy smaller than the size of Italy with more pressure coming. Russia is more isolated than ever. This doesn't make Russia great. It makes you a pariah state. You, the Russian people, and the military can do better. I'm a little bit pessimistic that an appeal to the Russian people is going to do much at this point. We've not seen a lot of movement at all, really, inside of Russia, whether that is the fault of the Russian people or it's just a testament to how much of a crackdown the Russian state has on dissenting opinions. I'm not entirely sure, but it's hard to say right now that appealing to the people inside of Russia is a solid path forward in this conflict. But Graham continued on, kind of suggesting, hey, things are different now, Putin. You better listen. Seriously, this time? Better listen. He says, same old from Putin's Russia. Escalate to de-escalate. Drag it out, hoping others lose interest. There's a new sheriff in town. The old playbook won't work this time. Maybe. I would argue that playbook is working right now. Putin has done a good job of making sure that this war was not ended inside of 24 hours after the President Trump took office. I think we've passed the 100-day mark now as well. Like, there's no indication that Russia is moving towards a peaceful settlement. They are dragging this out. And I just want to mention that this comes at a cost. Okay, at the very base level, it's the cost of lives. Every day that this settlement is not reached, there are more people dying. There are more Ukrainians killed, more missiles flying into Ukrainian cities every single day that a peace deal isn't reached here. So, yeah, dragging it out even 24, 48, 72 hours has a very, very real impact. Now, in terms of my personal assessment of what this all means, going back to Trump's statement here, saying what Vladimir Putin doesn't realize is that if it weren't for me, lots of really bad things would have already happened to Russia, and I mean really bad. He's playing with fire. My view, personal opinion, is that when Trump came into office, he likely had a wide array of options available to take as it relates to this war, and a wide range. Right on one end may have been the more hawkish view of more advanced weapons to Ukraine, take the gloves off where and how they can strike, maybe increase intelligence sharing, and then come down harder on the Russian economy with sanctions and shut down oil exports, things like that. The other side of that, but we didn't do that. Somewhere on the other side of the spectrum is what we have done, which has been pretty easygoing on Russia, all things considered. I would argue that we've come down a little harder on Ukraine than Russia over the last few months, and I think that's what Trump is saying to Putin here is, hey, I could have gone this route that would have been worse for you, and I came in and I said, no, we're going to try talking, we're going to try engagement, we're going to try things that don't necessarily result in more dead Russians and a more damaged Russian economy. I think that's what Trump is getting at here, but of course we're forced to read between the lines. Another assessment that I wanted to provide comes from Megan Mobbs here. She's the president at RT Weatherman. She's a big Ukraine advocate, the daughter of General Keith Kellogg, the U.S. envoy to Ukraine, and we crossed paths at West Point, actually. She's an 08 grad, I'm an 09 grad. Small world in that sense, but nonetheless, very pro-Ukraine, does a lot of work to support Ukraine and the fighters over there. She said, let me break down the president's strategy and psychology here. And she actually ended with this. I'm moving it up to the front because I think this is more important to get this piece out there first. She said, President Trump would be well advised to immediately follow through with actions that economically strangle the Russian war machine and demonstrate peace through strength. Semantics, I think that would have been a good thing to lead with. But then getting into the psychology that she breaks down of President Trump, she has three different segments here. She said, first, power broker persona. Trump is signaling that the only reason Russia hasn't faced far worse consequences is because of his leadership. He's positioning himself as the indispensable deal maker whose presence alone restrains escalation and creates leverage for peace. Second, a veiled threat to Putin. By warning Putin that he's playing with fire, Trump is introducing more pressure into the negotiations. It serves as a warning and a signal that if Putin continues to stall or escalate, Trump may abandon restraint and respond harshly. This is a negotiating tactic ratcheting up perceived consequences to push Putin towards a deal. This is long overdue and likely more will be needed. And third, strategic ambiguity. She says the vagueness around what really bad things means leaves Russia uncertain about red lines or possible retaliation. This unpredictability is meant to create psychological pressure and increases American leverage in the talks without committing to specific actions. She says this is Trumpian. He is using the language of strength and uncertainty to influence the deal-making and saying that a resolution of the war hinges on how seriously he is taken by Putin. And then again, to wrap up, she says, President Trump would be well advised to immediately follow through with actions that economically strangle the Russian war machine and demonstrate peace through strength. That term, peace through strength, is speaking Trump's language. That has been the hallmark of the Defense Department under Pete Hegseth in recent months. Every one of their videos, every one of their statements harkens back to that, peace through strength. So it's not unsurprising that Megyn found a way to incorporate that into the statement here, directed at what President Trump may or may not be doing. But nonetheless, the war of words continues between Russia and the United States over the ongoing war in Ukraine. We'll see. The trend right now is that Trump is becoming more and more frustrated with the lack of progress in bringing about an end to this conflict. I personally think military informant there had a pretty good assessment that Trump underestimated the complexities of this war and thought it would just take a friendly smile and a nice handshake to bring the two parties together and resolve all of their differences. I think we're a long ways away from that. My understanding right now is General Kellogg is working on gathering requirements from the two sides as to what they both would need to bring about an end to the war, and maybe that'll jumpstart some sort of talks. I believe that is scheduled for the end of June. So till then, we'll see if this war of words escalates or de-escalates into anything further. But that's all I got for now. Thanks for watching, and I'll see y'all next time.